For decades, car chase movies had pretty much subscribed to the same methodology when we're talking about the motion picture cars. Basically, they would pick the cars that they wanted each of the actors to drive, and they would build backup cars for stunts and basically call it a day. That would be the end of it. And in fact, if we look at a movie like Bullitt, the 1968 classic chase film featuring Steve McQueen, everybody knows that movie, we didn't learn until later that they only had 2 Mustangs for that movie, both of which were loaned to the production team just for the movie, and they were loaned to the production team by Ford. I found that absolutely amazing. Only 2 cars total, 1 hero car and a backup car. This basically means that both the hero and the backup car had to be used for the stunts. And that's nuts. There's no way any motion picture would do it that way today, especially when you consider things like the stunt sequences in Bullitt took 2 weeks to film. I don't know how they did it, but somehow they pulled it off. It means a lot of work after hours on the cars, right? So we're gonna find out how it's done today and why so many cars are needed for today's action movies right after the break. I don't know if you know this, but I actually now have a merch store, and if you haven't checked out the video description below my videos, then you're missing out. Currently, I've got a pack full of movie quote t-shirts, and more styles are being added every month, and new items are in development right now. So have a look, see if there's anything you like, and wear it with pride. The link is in the video description below. Even from a young age, I was always a fan of car chase movies. Movies like Ronin, all of the Transporter movies, Bullitt, of course, and a handful of others always thrilled me. Turns out I grew up in just the right neighborhood to see those kind of things happen in real life. I grew up in a sleepy suburb of Los Angeles called Newhall. My summers were spent watching TV shows being produced, 1970s shows like Knight Rider, Chips, Fall Guy, a few segments of the Rockford Files, and even Dukes of Hazzard were all filmed within a few miles of my house or within a short ride from my house. So I got to see how cars were used in movies and TV shows. And I was always fascinated by it. And watching these camera crews film car chases really fascinated me, mostly because these cars were moving so slow on set. I couldn't believe it would look good on TV, and somehow through editing, or sped up footage, or whatever magic they did, it turned out kind of okay. Years later, I found myself thrust into the world of movie cars by sheer chance, as you probably already know. And so I got a first-hand look at how major action films handle the process of creating picture cars, and now through the eyes of an adult rather than my skeptical teen self. Thankfully, I had experts like David Martyr, Ted Mosier, John Weiser, John Feinblatt, and a whole bunch of other people on the crew helping me understand how the picture car business worked, and it was a crash course. So really it's all about the illusion, as it turns out, right? Because if you can't see it from 25 feet away, you're not going to see it in the camera. That's one of the first things I learned. The other thing that I learned right out of the gate is that the hero designation does not refer to the car that the movie's hero will be driving. That's not the way it works. The hero car has nothing to do with Paul Walker or Vin Diesel. It has nothing to do with who will be driving the car in the movie. Get that out of your head. I've been saying this for a while, but despite my best efforts to pass this information along to the masses, I'm still getting inundated by people making references to used movie cars as hero cars, when in fact, what they're showing me is usually a stunt car, or in many cases, a private-built replica that was never in the movie at all, and they just don't understand the phrase hero car. And so I want to kind of get that squared away. So please humor me again once more while I explain this in the clearest language possible, and I'll walk you through it so everybody has an understanding what each car's role is in a movie production. Movie productions are basically broken down into 2 main segments: first unit and second unit. First unit is the unit responsible usually for filming the scenes where the actors and actresses will appear. This is also sometimes called the principal unit, principal photography. Even though we're talking about film, they still call it principal photography. The second unit is typically the production team assigned to capture the stunt sequences, usually, right? And this is called second unit, or the stunt team. There are, of course, other components of the production process, but for our purposes in this discussion, we will focus on these 2 units. If we're speaking in relation to the Fast and Furious movies, since they're car movies, you can imagine that each unit will need to access the cars that the actors will drive in the movie, right? Stands to reason. Paul Walker will drive this car, just putting around, and then he'll probably do some stunts on the same car, right? So this is the reason that some cars are dedicated to work on the first unit, and the second unit has their own versions of these cars, right? So we won't just have one orange Supra, we'll have multiple, right? So let's take a look at how it played out with some of the main cars from the first two movies. We know that with cars like those that we saw in the first two movies were used for scenes with actors and in action scenes. That means sometimes these cars had to be in the same place at the same time. So it's conceivable that the first unit is at one location filming the actors, while the stunt team, the second unit, might be in another location miles away on the same day filming with the same cars. How do you do that? If you only have two cars, you need to have multiple cars. So obviously you need more than one of any particular car to accomplish this. In some scenarios, there may be a need to have one of these cars on a soundstage in California, thousands of miles away, while the rest of the cars and the rest of the production teams are all in Florida, which actually happened. And so as part of the schedule planning process, the picture car team will come up with a plan as to how many examples of any one car will need to be built so that each unit of the production team can have access to one of these cars, and so that the production schedule for each unit can work independently. For example, in the first movie, there were 7 green Eclipses and there were 5 RX-7s used. Some were on first unit, some were on second unit. Some were on a green screen and a stage. There were a total of 8 Supras available. And so when we talk about the Hero 1 car, the Hero 1 car really is the nicest, shiniest, most functional car of the lot of Supras that we would have. The Hero 1 car is also called the first unit principal car, and this is the car that the actor will use to pull up and make his, her, or her grand entrance. That's always the nicest one. A Hero 2 car is the exact replica of a Hero 1 car and serves as a backup in case the Hero 1 car gets damaged, it has a mechanical failure, or is otherwise unavailable. It's just that simple. The stunts that we would do with the Supra required 3 different stunt cars, so that makes now 5 Supras, right? Another one of the 8 Supras was cut up to serve as a MicRig car, which became basically a shell that was mounted to a specially built van with an attached kind of trailer kind of thing going on, built into the back of the van essentially, and that accounts for the 6th Supra. Another one of the 8 Supras was never even painted orange. It remained silver, and it was used on a soundstage against a green screen to capture that, what was it, the nighttime sequence. Letty and Brian were driving through the desert, and this was the 7th Supra on the key list. So that takes care of 7 of the 8. Another one of these 8 Supras became the Buck car, the car that we see Dom and Brian building in the garage, the one where they're sitting inside the engine bay and they're having that whole discussion and that kind of thing. And the burned out wrecked Supra was a loaner car and was not on the key list. So again, the Hero car designation has nothing to do with who was driving the car in the movie. That's not what it means, so I hope that's clear. But I guess the more interesting story is that the first 2 movies were unique in how movie cars were produced, as I came to find out later on. Typically, they just basically build the cars they need. But because of the low budget of the first movie, director Rob Cohen needed a way to execute his vision on a budget. And he had a grand vision for, these cars being really super duper, right? David Martyr, who was the picture car captain, recruited a fellow by the name of Eddie Paul and a staff of craftsmen, mechanics, who were not only talented, but well connected in the picture car business. So they could have got a lot of people to jump on board, and they did. They brought on people like Ted Mosier, who was the picture car captain on the second movie, John Feinblatt, who's been on every decent car movie ever, Tim Woods and all of his amazing mechanics who helped to create replicas of the Hero 1 cars, all of which were rented from private owners like me and Scott Santra and John Lappin and so forth. As you probably know, some of us spent months building our own cars, and Universal's picture car team was tasked with building an exact cosmetic replica of each of these cars in 5 days or less. And we were like, hey, there's no way it's going to happen. But granted, with the replicas, we didn't need to have full audio, video systems, or working nitrous systems, or even modified engines, because if any engine would be shown on camera, we'd get those shots by filming the Hero 1 car. John Lapid's Green Eclipse is a perfect example. That's pretty much the only one we saw in the engine of, now that I think of it. And because we didn't have the budget in the first movie to replicate all the interiors on all the cars, we tinted all the windows dark on all of the cars, that you could not see that the stunt cars didn't have working gauges, racing harnesses, big tacks, nitrous bottles, or any of that stuff. And that's why all those windows were tinted really dark. A little piece of trivia there for you. The second movie, Too Fast, Too Furious, was a bit different. Our budget was more than twice than that of the first movie, and so most of the cars got the full treatment. That means that we could take a Hero 1 car and fix it all up and put most of that same equipment in the replica cars. All of the S2000s, the Evos, and the Gold Supers got full audio video systems. None of them worked, but the components were there so that you could see them, and we didn't tint the windows so you could still see all that stuff at night. And so this was highly unusual with movie cars, as I later learned. John Singleton, who was the director of that movie, was adamant about showcasing what these cars were really about, and he wanted to capture all of that essence. John's goal was to immerse audiences in the subculture, paying special attention to the local Latin influences on how people modify their cars down there in Miami in 2002. So what this basically meant is eating copious amounts of neon tubing to every car. And while that wasn't my jam, it was certainly accurate of how people were building those cars in that part of town back then in 2002. Tokyo Drift marked a turning point in the Fast franchise insofar how movie cars would be built for these films going forward. Since they had a pretty decent budget, they could pretty much build what they wanted to do. And a new director meant a whole new crew. Dennis McCarthy became the picture car captain, and under his leadership, he's taken the cars to a whole new level, producing some amazing custom-built vehicles. Between his in-house team and collaborations with other amazing car builders all across the world, we've been treated to cars like the Ice Charger, which was built in-house using some of Dennis's go-to part suppliers, and the Maxima Charger, built by Tom Nelson of Nelson Racing Engines. Everybody remembers that car for this scene. And here in the beginning of 2022, we're waiting the final two installments, Fast 10 and Fast 11, which are guaranteed to be over-the-top action-wise. They're going to go out with a bang. You can count on it. I'll bet money on it. And if that's not enough, reliable sources have claimed, and this is public information, that Dominic Toretto will be killed off, or it will be made to look like he was killed off in either 10 or 11. And as the stunts have become more and more elaborate in each subsequent movie, and as CG effects have become more commonplace, one thing that has remained the same, and that is that Dennis's team knows how many cars are needed for any given sequence, and he pulls out all the stops to provide reliable and spectacular cars for the production. He has all the resources at his disposal to keep audiences on the edge of their seats and keep the production running smoothly. And so no matter what we think about the storylines, it would be hard to argue that this franchise has not set the bar for all car chase movies for all time. If anybody's going to come along and do it better, I doubt I'll live long enough to see it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with your friends, and we'll see you next time.